The Luangwa Valley in Zambia bakes in the African sun. It has come through countless droughts, and it will survive this one. But there are other forces at work which have had a far more profound effect on the wildlife of Luangwa. Some animals have suffered more than others, and two species have come into conflict as never before. The camera woman, Cindy Buxton, made a survival film here in 1976, the year after Luangwa was declared a national park. The film was called Last Kingdom of the Elephants. This is how things were in those innocent days. The narrator was Orson Welles.
The Luangwa Valley in Zambia is Africa as everyone dreams of it. Africa before man began to slaughter and confine its wildlife. In the valley, man barely exists.
Now, as then, the lifeline for all the animals during the dry season is the river. The Luangwa National Park protects more than 9,000 square kilometers of woodland and open plains. Its eastern boundary is 250 kilometers of winding river. As the park begins to show the first signs of stress from lack of rain, it is the scavengers that benefit most. Others, such as elephants, are able to move on in search of green vegetation. The rains are late. Standing water is evaporating fast. Buffalo come down to drink and wallow in the shallow pools that remain. For the leopards of Luangwa, there is plenty of prey, but they may not be able to keep their kill to themselves for long. Hyenas and leopards have always been rivals, but in Luangwa, past events have forced these two species into closer competition. As tourism has increased, the animals have become accustomed to spotlights. They're used on the night drives organized for visitors to the national park. Under cover of darkness, the leopard has lost out to the hyenas. Cindy and her assistant Paula have come back to record the shift in the balance of power, which is taking place on Luangwa's dry plains. Some, such as this serval, searching for rodents and small birds, are only minor characters. Others just have walk-on parts. A crowned crane, roosting clear of the ground, is only an onlooker. It is the leopards that play the starring role. Luangwa has always been a good place to see leopards. Their story took a strange turn in 1987. A series of events took place then, which was to have unforeseen consequences far along the food chain. It started with the hippos. One of the old oxbow lagoons is dotted with them. This was once part of the river, but now it's a separate lake, covered in thick Nile cabbage. The hippos don't eat the cabbage itself, but the waterweed that grows amongst it. Herons and jacanas hang around them, snapping up small creatures disturbed as the giants feed. The population of hippos now is just about as large as it was in 1976, but they had a severe setback in between. Although hippos are not really gregarious, during the dry season they are crammed together in whatever water remains in the river. At this time, they are very susceptible to infectious diseases. In 1987, a fifth of Luangwa's hippos, 4,000 of them, died in an outbreak of anthrax. The crowds are unavoidable. Hippos must wallow in mud or water to keep damp throughout the hottest part of the day. They are martyrs to sunburn, as well as dehydration. After 1987, much of the hippo population was transformed into food for the scavengers in the park. The first to benefit were crocodiles. The glut of hippo meat served to sustain their population. The surviving hippos occasionally take exception to the scavengers in their midst. Lions, too, are not above scavenging when they have the chance. The lions will stay close by to guard the carcass into the night. The greatest beneficiaries from the plague that struck down the hippos were the hyenas that roam the valley at night. Although they are quite successful hunters, their main role in life is as scavengers. And in 1987, they came into their own. One lion can drive away a small raiding party, and crocodiles have an obvious advantage, being already in the water with the prey. When a lion decides to compete with a crocodile for food, the hyenas are wise enough to take a back seat. In the long term, the hyenas benefited most of all. The population grew to a new high level and hasn't fallen since then. The puppies born in the boom years of 1987 and 88 are now grown to maturity and rearing young of their own. There are enough adult hyenas in Luangwa for them to form large packs, big enough to hunt and kill buffalo for themselves. The additional food helps the population maintain its high level, so that now nowhere in the park is out of reach of patrolling hyenas at night. This has had a profound effect on the fortunes of the leopards of Luangwa. The reason for the abundance of predators in the park is quite simply the abundance of prey, even in dry conditions. The key to their survival is the river and the oxbow lagoons. The river describes great loops across the level plain, forming lagoons when it finds a new, shorter route for itself, leaving the lagoon isolated. Eventually, the lagoons become choked with vegetation, forming new swathes of grazing for the animals. One such change took place during the 15 years that Cindy was away. She filmed this amazing sequence on what was then the bank of the river.
A small party of hunting dogs is on the prowl. One picks up the scent. A young puku is hidden in the grass. Against all odds, the puku escapes. Then an incredible thing happens. The puku makes a mistake and leaps into the river in terror. But the big crocs below made no mistake.
This is where that sequence was filmed. However, the river is no longer there. The place is dry ground, and hunting dogs are now very scarce, having succumbed to the same outbreak of anthrax that killed the hippos. Another lagoon nearby still holds some water. Crocodiles lurk under the Nile cabbage. Zebra come to drink there. They are safe enough while they stay on the lagoon's muddy banks. When the group is disturbed by a sudden panic, a young one loses its footing and falls into the clinging mud. A large crocodile is quick to spot the opportunity. Cindy and Paula had to set up their lights to film the outcome, an hour or more later. Despite a final challenge from the zebra, the crocodile eventually managed to get a grip in which it could twist the zebra's neck. When the prey was dead, other crocodiles moved in to share the feast. A party of lions passing by could only watch hungrily from the bank. The rainy season had been a failure, from October through into April. Then at the very end of the season, the long drought seemed to be about to end, as clouds gathered, and the first rains of the year visited the Luangwa Valley. The smaller lagoons were soon flooded, their crop of Nile cabbage floating down to the river with the overflowing water. The parched scene takes on a tinge of green. Flowers seek pollinators, and seeds and tubers that have lain dormant are stirred into life. Even butterflies benefit from the arrival of the rains. Warthogs are accustomed to making use of the short new growth. Low-lying areas hold the water longest, turning into lush pastures under the influence of even such short rainfall. The baboons take advantage of the freshly shooting grass, eating the most nutritious part of the plants. Elephants must wallow every day to keep their skin supple and free from parasites. Even a little rain has made their bathing easier. But the wet season, such as it was, is over. The trampled earth, pocked with elephant footprints, soon sets like concrete once more. Where the ground level is lowest, in the old oxbows, the muddy conditions last longest. There will be a few more baths for the elephants, and a few more days feeding for birds that can dig into the mud or snap up the fish and frogs that have been stranded by the renewed drought. A Nile monitor explores the remaining muddy areas. Jacanas mate at the beginning of the dry season, relying on there being permanent water in the deepest oxbows. This muddy time of year is a poor substitute for the full flush of a proper rainy season. However, it has brought respite for most of Luangwa's wild inhabitants. Crowned cranes roost together in noisy groups in the middle of open spaces to give them warning of approaching predators. The center of a drying lagoon is ideal. They flourish from the Congo to South Africa, wherever there's enough open country, preferably with reliable marshes all year round. But for the leopards, the rains have brought little relief from pursuit by their dark shadows, the hyenas. Spotlighting leopards is frustrating work. All too often the predator goes where it can't be followed, or just disappears silently into the night. Cindy Buxton and Paula Coulter have come across a female who seems unaware of their presence. She has found the scent of a herd of impala. She begins to stalk her prey. Ignoring the lights, she moves purposefully towards the herd. The kill takes place behind a bush, but the leopard is undisturbed when the camera team follows her. She has caught a fine impala, but she also has a problem. Now that it's dark, the hyenas will not be far away. Her first aim must be to get the impala up a tree where they can't reach it. She is carrying an animal which is about her own weight, but she soon has it safely stowed. Now she can relax and consider fetching her cubs to share the meal. First, though, she tries to hide the evidence of the kill. She covers the blood with dust in the hope that its scent will be less conspicuous to hyenas. Before long, the cubs follow her out of the bush. The cub is 6 months old and fully weaned, but it can get little out of the carcass. Its mother has wedged it awkwardly in the tree, and the cub can't get a proper grip on it. But at least the food is safe. Already the first patrolling hyena has found the site of the kill. The increased threat from hyenas arose after the great food glut of 1987, when they were able to gorge themselves on hippos killed by an outbreak of anthrax. Today, there are so many of them that nowhere in the valley is safe from their attentions. But this leopard now has both cubs with her in the safety of the tree. Her prey is secure, but another leopard has lodged its kill much lower in another tree nearby. It looks as though it might be within reach of a passing hyena. But it is beyond reach. Chewing the tree in frustration at its inability to reach the food, the hyena tries another approach. Hyenas are not built to climb, and the leopard seems to have been a fine judge of how far its competitor can reach. Another night, another leopard kill. This time, a clan of hyenas patrolling the area find the leopard before she can carry her prey to safety. As the first hyena approaches, the leopard runs. There is no point in getting into a fight. If the leopard were to be injured, she would have even less chance of feeding her cubs. She must leave the kill to the hyenas and go hunting again. Two strange hyenas appear on the scene. There is little protest from the blood-stained five as the intruders remove the remains of the carcass. The robbers trot off into the night with their booty. Dominant animals are usually larger than subordinates, but this may be because dominant individuals have freer access to food. The original thieves have nothing left to do but lick up the last remaining bloodstains. A mile or so away, Cindy and Paula find another leopard up a tree, watching the enemy below. It is almost directly above a hyena den, where a pack is rearing pups. Suddenly, a hyena arrives in the clearing, carrying the remains of an impala. Can this be one of the seniors which has just removed the kill they had been filming? The leopard makes his escape, while the hyenas are distracted by the arrival of food. For all their ferocity towards each other, adult hyenas are very gentle with their young. The puppy wasn't punished for its outrageous behavior. Perhaps selfishness is a virtue among hyenas. Finally, the whole family fades into the darkness. As a result of the constant harassment by hyenas, the leopards are changing their feeding habits. They now tend to concentrate on immature antelope, which are more portable, and they usually disembowel their victim before climbing to make it even lighter. If trees in general are an essential refuge for leopards, one species of tree in particular is a boon to many of Luangwa's animals. It's called Kigelia, or, because of the shape of its fruit, the sausage tree. It produces large, glamorous flowers, which are pollinated by a variety of birds, bats, and insects. When the flowers fall, they are eaten by a number of animals, including puku, which seem to find them irresistible. The young fruit, when they appear, are a nourishing source of food for anything that can reach them, which rather limits the list. Elephants prefer the leaves. Giraffes are the only animals that can make use of the fresh food supply. By the time the fruits fall to the ground, ripe, they are almost impenetrable. They're an easy meal for only one of Luangwa's surviving animals. Hippos crunch them up like carrots. Luangwa now has well over 20,000 hippos again, after the near disaster of the anthrax epidemic. On the banks where they leave their droppings, baby sausage trees grow. But in 1976, there was another, more important distributor of sausage tree seeds.
If Luangwa is the last kingdom of the elephant, it is also the last stronghold of the black rhino. There are at least 4,000 of these great animals in the valley, more than in any other wilderness area of comparable size in Africa. They too are finding food hard to come by in the leafless, grassless, yellow ochre world of late October.
But no more. There might be as few as 10 left in the whole park. Poaching wiped them out, their horns ground for Far Eastern medicines, or carved into the handles of Arab daggers. All that remains now is piles of bleached skulls, with the horns hacked off. Poaching still continues, but at a less commercial level. Intruders to the park set snares for whatever game animals they might catch. Snares are horribly unselective in what they take. This particular array of wire and sprung twigs was dismantled, but another was already wound tightly round the neck and foreleg of a lion, where it had evidently been for some time. In spite of the efforts of the park staff, the lion died a couple of days later. The feeble rainy season has left the park in a parched condition, bringing increasing hardship to most of the animals. Only the fishing birds gain any advantage as the water table falls further. The dwindling lagoons are full of fish, and the birds move in to feed at will. The search for water brings elephants and baboons together at the muddy pools. Buffalo cross the dusty plains to gather at the last permanent water. They are thin and in poor condition, having walked miles to find the nearest grass, and miles back for their essential daily drink. The shrinking pools take their toll of animals weakened by the long daily march. The trapped animals will die slowly of thirst, unless a kindly predator finds them and puts them out of their misery. An old skeleton nearby bears the unmistakable tooth marks of hyenas. As it turned out, this young buffalo was more fortunate than most, having been discovered by people before the lions found it. The park biologist darts it with a tranquilizer, and the combined and very muddy efforts of the park staff finally drag it clear of what would have become its last wallow. When it has been winched out of the mud and restored to dry land, the biologist gives it an antidote. Most of the casualties of the drought do not have such good fortune. At times like these, one group does well from the misfortunes of others, the vultures. Circling high above the park, they spot the corpses of the fallen from a great distance away, homing in on any sign of a gathering of their own kind. The local people are also suffering from the drought. They still need to fish, even though the lagoons where they usually go are dry. Ignoring the danger from crocodiles and hippos, they take their seine nets to the river where it borders the park. The catch is poor by their standards, but it adds welcome variety to their diet, restricted by the dry weather. As the season wears on into October, Cindy Buxton saw the park as she remembered it from her earlier visit, harsh and dry, sustaining only the strongest and most resilient of its animal inhabitants. In the oppressive heat and silence, a single hippo tries to find relief from the sun in a pathetic little pool. A giraffe, covered in oxpeckers, sucks the last drops from a muddy puddle. The whole valley has the air of waiting for something to happen, to rescue it from death by drought. In spite of the worsening drought, many of Luangwa's animals seem to be managing to survive. The animals of the Zambian plains are no strangers to harsh conditions. Young animals often rise above whatever problems their parents might be suffering. Often the adults make sacrifices on behalf of their offspring. The lions are so far unaffected by the dry weather. Hunting is easy when the prey animals are concentrated at a few waterholes. Several prides in the valley have healthy cubs, and evidently plenty of food. The health of lions does not depend on the health of their prey. Even if the drought began to affect the herds of herbivores, the lions would only find them easier to catch. They'll have no problems until they become short of water to drink. As they are relatively immune to the effects of the drought, they mate all the year round. They can find food all year round too. A dozen at a time can feed handsomely on a single buffalo. Hyenas wait in the wings, too timid to approach nearer, but too hungry to move away. The hope is that the lions will move away bloated, leaving the remains of the kill to them. Lions, especially lone males without a pride to support them, will scavenge whatever dead meat they can find. But an ancient hippo carcass, long dried in the sun, proves unattractive even to a hungry lion. A recently dead elephant is more appetizing to another roving male. Anthrax is always present in Luangwa. The elephant still has its tusks, so it has not been killed by poachers. The park authorities need to establish the cause of its death. When the lions and the other scavengers have finished with the corpse, they come to investigate. The first job with any elephant that dies of natural causes is to remove the tusks into safekeeping, so that they don't fall into the hands of ivory traders. At the same time, the vet takes samples of tissues to test for disease. Everyone who touches the carcass must wear protective gloves. And after the tusks have been removed and samples taken, they are carefully cleaned with disinfectant. The precautions proved necessary. This elephant had died of anthrax. The staff will now keep a careful watch for any more victims. Although anthrax did not affect the hyenas, it killed off most of the hunting dogs in Luangwa. The loss of the hunting dogs may have contributed to the hyenas' great and continuing success. Their packs have multiplied to cover the whole valley, causing problems for the leopards that are one of the main predators. More often than before, packs meet and skirmish as they roam through the bush. A pack on the move at dusk is setting out to scour its territory for carrion or for hunting leopards. The next morning, in their regular tour of the park, Cindy and Paula come across a group of elephants wallowing in the remains of a drying lagoon. 15 years earlier, elephants had been the cause of what seemed to be a disaster to the park's vegetation.
Luangwa is truly the last kingdom of the elephants. 100,000 of them are free to roam a valley 300 miles long. It may seem strange that Luangwa elephants are seldom seen in large herds. The explanation is almost certainly that they're not under the pressures that drive elephants to form large herds elsewhere. Opane, winterthorn, baobab, they strip or ring bark the lot. It's the same with the last great concentrations of elephants everywhere in Africa. The difference in Luangwa Valley is that the elephants are being left to sort out their own problems without man's interference. It's hard to say how the battle between elephants and trees will eventually work out. Perhaps if they go on destroying the trees, the elephant population will suffer a severe decline. Certainly parts of the woodland, especially the Mopane woodland, are already suffering as if from continual bombardment. They've begun to resemble those shattered treescapes of World War I.
In some parts of the valley, the shattered treescapes are still there. An area like this, which has been flooded since the devastation, is now covered with a baked hardpan, which prevents any tree seedlings from growing. It might be several years before any vegetation manages to crack the surface. The legacy of the elephants is still to be seen, in damaged baobab trees standing about the park. Their trunks are holed and scarred, but they can still transmit enough sap to keep the trees alive. The baobab has evolved to withstand the attentions of elephants. The trees suffer less now. Luangwa's 100,000 elephants are today reduced to 10,000. Not by a natural decline, but by poaching. The slaughter increased the number of elephants without tusks. The condition is hereditary. About 1 in 10 of the herd were always tuskless. Since the poaching, it's more than a quarter of the population. The poachers shot everything with ivory, leaving mainly tuskless animals to breed. The average age of the leading females has fallen from 70 to 20. These tribes are led not by matriarchs, but by adolescents. The traditions of elephant society, once taught to the young by senior females, will have to be built up again, virtually from scratch. The changes in the park, brought about by disease and poaching, will last a long time. The effect of the drought will not be so long-lived. Although the park is a dry and dusty place at this time of year, Luangwa is accustomed to being parched. Dust devils scuttle along its banks. But though the river is low, it is never quite dry. There is water too in the larger, deeper oxbow lagoons, though most of them are now just muddy expanses in the arid plain. Zebra are still doing well, eating the dry grasses left over from the drought. They are the only animal that can make full use of such tough, bitter food, and they have little competition for this unpopular resource. One zebra bears scars from an attack by a lion, a reminder that, after buffalo, they are the big cat's favorite prey. These lions have fed. They spend most of the daylight hours under a shady tree, digesting their last meal. But times are getting harder. To drink, they now have to make do with muddy water from puddles too small to attract the herds of game. A dozen of them feed on a single warthog that in better times would hardly make a snack for one. The resourceful baboons mimic wading birds, digging in the mud. But their food is grass roots, not snails. At last, the season is turning. Clouds gather over the valley, heralding an end to the drought. After the rains, much of Luangwa becomes impassable as the black cotton soil turns to the consistency of warm butter. In the heavy, humid atmosphere, you can almost hear the plants growing as the park is restored by the rain. The river is rising. The hippos will soon be able to return to the lagoons where they spend the wet season. Most of them, that is. Some few will stay behind to take their place in the food chain. As the lagoons fill up and the drought fades into memory, Cindy Buxton and Paula Coulter reflect on the changes they have seen in Luangwa National Park. There is still plenty of prey, supporting predators, such as the leopard, which is still managing to hold its own, despite its newly discovered conflict with a burgeoning hyena population. The hyenas themselves go from strength to strength. Since the hippo plague, they've never looked back. As for the elephants, they are increasing in numbers again as poaching declines. Unlike the black rhino and the hunting dog, protection should guarantee them a secure future. Last Kingdom of the Elephants is still a good name for Luangwa National Park. In spite of its losses, the park still protects one of the largest herds in Africa, along with lions and leopards and their prey. The balance of nature shifts this way and that, under the influence of disease and drought, and human activities. But the park has an underlying stability which should enable it to retain its place among the jewels of wild Africa.